Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. I am thrilled to have a returning guest on the program. That's Steve Weinberg, and I had Steve on the program in 2022, and we talked about his book, Above Quota Performance. And it was a fantastic conversation. And I'm super excited to share that Steve has published a new book, Above Quota Sales Management, a similar style, but focusing on sales managers. And Steve, first and foremost, welcome back to Get Down to Business. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shalom. I'm really happy to be back.
Absolutely. So following that success of your first book for sales professionals, you're turning your attention to sales managers. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write this book?
Sure. I mean, the first one was really oriented towards the individual, what we used to call the bag-carrying salespeople. Now that term isn't used anymore, but the individual sales contributor. And the second book is really oriented towards a manager. And what I found after issuing the first one and talking to people was they said to me, well, one of the things I talk about in the book, in the first book and the second one, is that about 50% of the salespeople don't reach their quota on average every year. And people said to me, well, how do we fix that? What do we do about it? And that's what I tried to attack in the second book. What do we do about the 50%? And what should the sales managers do? And as I talked to sales managers, and of course I was one myself, I found that most of them were not doing what I would think are the most optimal activities to help their salespeople.
Yeah, for sure. And many sales managers we know do get promoted from the sales floor itself. What are some of the biggest challenges that these new managers face in transitioning to a leadership role?
Well, it's a totally different function. When you're out calling on prospects and trying to convince them to buy your solution or service, that's a salesperson. The sales manager is tasked with the idea of managing a team of people and having each and every one of them exceed their quota, hopefully. And normally their compensation is based on that happening. So if there's a problem, and what I found is that most sales managers didn't attack one of the biggest issues, which is having an open sales position. Most sales managers, and this includes me, so I'm part of the problem, we'd rather close deals. They're much more fun. I mean, this is what it's all about. Go out and close deals. Help salespeople close the deal. But what they're not doing is, if there's an open position or if there's somebody underperforming, realizing that there's a problem and spending the time interviewing new people and bringing them on board and getting them up and running quickly. And most sales managers don't do that very well. And in fact, they don't like doing it. So they don't do it.
Yeah, I want to dive deeper into that. Again, chatting with Steve Weinberg. And Steve, sales can be a high pressure environment. What are some strategies that you recommend for sales managers to support the mental health and well-being of their teams?
That's a really good point, Shalom. And it's something that most managers, including me in the past, have ignored. And we didn't realize that a lot of people had a lot of pressures from the job and also outside the job that affected their job. And as I managed people, I saw that many of them had some very difficult times, such as going through divorces, suicides, attempted suicides, and drug uses. And a lot of these were exacerbated by their sales or lack of sales in their daily performance. So, I mean, some people weren't earning enough money. They would argue with their spouse and then end up splitting. Or they would, seek help from alcohol or drugs, or not recognize that they can't handle the stress and not getting the mental attention that they should get. And again, I experienced having people commit suicide. And that really, that's very devastating to me as well. But the sales manager needs to know how to recognize when that's occurring and then how to get that person help immediately and not put it off. even if that person doesn't want to help. So in the past, again, in the old days, when we had that happen, we just cut the salesperson. We said, we don't want to deal with, let's get rid of Joe or Sally. But now that's not the best strategy. The best strategy is to try to get that person help and hopefully turn the situation around, because there is a lot of help available, and there are a lot of mental health professionals that can help them.
It's an important priority. I'm chatting with the author of Above Quota Sales Management. And before we cut to a short break, and don't worry, we'll have Steve right back on. We know that there is a rise of artificial intelligence and sales enablement tools. So, Steve, real quick, how can sales managers best leverage these technologies to optimize their team's performance?
Well, they're changing every day. So the hardest thing for the sales manager is to keep up to date on what's available, and then try to figure out which they can bring into their company, which will fit and which can help them. But there are things that, for example, can help them qualify leads. And that's a real simple thing, but a lot of salespeople struggle with that. So it's one application that could be used. And also preparing presentations and preparing emails and correspondence. That's something that can help. So the sales manager needs to be up to date on the technology and introduce it to the sales force and help them get up and running with it.
Yeah. Well, Steve, really appreciate you joining us over here. We're going to have to squeeze in a very quick break here on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Get on my website, syklein.com, or get on your favorite podcast app. And make sure you subscribe, rate, review, and share so you don't miss a single episode. When we come back, continue our conversation with the author of Above Quota Sales Management. That's Steve Weinberg. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Down to Business. I'm continuing my conversation with the author of Above Quota Sales Management. That is the one and only Steve Weinberg. Steve is, again, a returning guest. We've talked a little bit in the past about above quota performance, which was directed at sales professionals with the goal of improving their performance. But there's so many things that change just over time. We were just hitting on that right before the break and talking about how things have drastically advanced, including in artificial intelligence and other tools since that conversation in 2022. And now Steve is back talking about above quota sales management. So Steve, what has the reaction been so far, just as you've been getting out there and hitting the circuit, talking about some of these tips and techniques on sales management?
Well, some of what I discuss in both books really are very non-traditional, and they're perhaps a little bit confrontational to the existing conventional wisdom. So, for example, in the first book, I tell people to welcome objections, and some people think that's heresy. But in the second book, I talk about things like trying to understand what the personality type is of the buyer and customizing your messages to them. And also recognizing that there are a lot of younger people, the millennials in the marketplace, and they're different than prior generations. And people need to, if they want to succeed in selling them, they need to adapt to what the millennials are looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And I hesitate to call it a book because really it's there's so much more than just a collection of tips and techniques. It's really a comprehensive guide that is empowering sales managers to perform a high-performing, well-oiled sales machine. Are there any other sort of tips that you would recommend, especially for our small business owners that may wear many hats, but are trying to ensure that they are gearing up for growth and ensuring that as they advance and grow their own organizations, that they are setting their sales management up for success?
Well, one of the things that I found in studying salespeople was that salespeople go in with a pitch and they're very prepared to explain something to their prospect. But what they're not doing very well is listening to the prospect. So I think that one key takeaway that sales managers can do is to help their salespeople understand that they need to listen better and spend the time with their prospect and understand what they're looking for, as opposed to coming in and giving them a rapid fire pitch, because that'll turn people off. So it's much more important to listen than to talk.
Yeah, that's good advice. Steve, we're running close to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure our listeners can get in touch with you, learn more about Above Quota, and of course, get a copy of the book. How can they do that?
They can find me at www.steveweinbergsales.com. That's STEVEWEINBERG.com. I post a lot on LinkedIn, and I have a blog as well on my website. And some of the blog articles are about sales, and some are not. So I will answer anybody that inquires with me and try to help anybody out that I can.
I know you will. Steve Weinberg, I really appreciate all the expertise that you've provided in multiple conversations. And knowing you, my friend, you're going to be back with lots more advice because you continue to do great research, talk to folks in the field, and we'll bring that expertise and, of course, your books back on the program. Thank you again. That's a wrap for us this week on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Boy, oh boy, what a jam-packed week that we had, and some great, valuable guests. All of them are linked in my show notes on my website, syklein.com, and, of course, on our podcasts as well. Be sure to contact our sponsor, Tom Mirabali, independent agent for all of your health insurance and affordable care needs. 630-863-3477, 630-863-3477, or his website, healthplanchicago.com. We'll be back, of course, next Sunday at 6 p.m. right here on AM 560, The Answer, wherever podcasts can be found. And if you like the show, be sure to tell somebody about it or forward the podcast link. We always love feedback, and we always love to spread the word. Let's get down to business. We'll see you next week.